Great. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and thanks to Debbie for inviting me to talk about the why of impact measurement. We were chatting a couple of weeks ago about impact measurement and kind of why it's almost a difficult subject across the sector. I think there's a few reasons for that, and one of them is perhaps that we don't understand why impact measurement and tracking could be helpful to us. So I wanted to set up a session today where we can talk about the work that we're doing and the ways in which impact can and should be measured and tracked, the things that we're doing now, and to explore the questions that we might be able to answer through a bit of impact measurement. So as Debbie said, it's going to be very much a kind of thinking and doing session and a sharing. So please feel free to raise your hand, put some stuff in the chat, get involved. Yeah, we want to have quite an active session with everyone today. So I'm Bobi. I'm the founder of Be More Digital. It's now officially registered at Companies House. Back in 2019, I was working as interim head of digital at Target Ovarian Cancer, and we were doing a major digital transformation, or starting on kind of our new strategy. And within that, we needed to find a budget line for training, and we couldn't really find one thing for the organisation. So that's where I went off and set up Be More Digital as a way to try and create an answer to that question. So that's kind of where we are now, and at the moment it's very much on workshops, but in the future it will probably be more of a platform based type support. So we've already gone through a bit of housekeeping, but the big one that I want to kind of highlight is that no question is a silly one, and also obviously it is school holidays. Most of us are still at home, so please don't worry about any interruptions that there might be, and if you can keep your camera on, that would be great, because it makes me know that you're engaging, but I completely understand if you don't want it on as well. So here we go. So in the session, like I said, we're going to be doing quite a lot of practical, active conversations. So we're going to be using Jamboard. If you haven't used Jamboard before, please let me know, or let Debbie know in the chat, and then I can talk through a little bit more about how we do it when we get started. And I don't think we'll bother with the breakout rooms. I normally do that if we get over kind of 30 people, so we'll just kind of be able to manage it in this group as we've got it. What you'll take away is a new view on the value of impact and some questions to ponder on. It's quite a different session for me, actually, because normally it's a practical way of doing something. So yeah, it's interesting to see how this turns out for you all. So today it's all about giving you some time to think about things a little differently, and just giving you the opportunity to discuss and explore what you feel about impact measurement. So
great.
Let's get started.
Sorry, Bobi, just to let you know, there's a few people on the call who haven't used Jamboard before, so when you switch across, it would be helpful.
Thank you. Thanks. Great, we'll do a quick run through of how to do that for everyone. So just to get everyone okay with Zoom and the chat, I always try and do a little intros there. So if you can just go to the chat and tell me your name, where you're joining us from in the country or the world, and what you hope to take from this session. Is everyone still busy typing? Here we go.
Ooh. Sunny Chloe, we're all envious. It's disappeared in the south.
Yeah,
Oh,
I need to move back to the Midlands, it would seem. Great, so we've got some people looking for specifically the fundraising and evaluation side of impact measurement. Sophie has highlighted that she wants a deeper understanding of what impact looks like, because there is a variety of contexts, and that's really what we're going to be exploring today is kind of the different contexts of it. Great, and we have Carice, who is looking to implement measurement across different comms platforms as well. That's great. Impact is a minefield, yes. It can be. So hopefully we will get on top of a few of those things. I can't promise being able to tell you how to do it a lot of the time, because we are going to be focusing on the why. But Lucy Maynard is going to be running a session next week. If you haven't already signed up for it, I'll ask Debbie to share it in the link, because I think that would be a great kind of, the sessions are designed to be a connection to each other. So yeah, great. So I'll quickly move on to our first Jamboard. Which I will share in the chat. So in the chat, I've just shared a link to a Jamboard. So if you haven't used Jamboard before, if you click the link, it should open a new tab on your internet browser. And essentially, it's just a blank sheet of whiteboard. And we're going to add on some post-it notes with our thoughts. So if you go to this little post-it note sticky note icon here, it'll come up with a little pop-up, and you can change the colors to whatever you feel you want. And then you can add in what impact means to you. So for me, it is about tracking and understanding progress. Save, and it pops up here. So if you want, let's get started and start adding our own little sticky notes. If you're having any trouble, please let me know.
I can help with moving your postage if you want to keep on typing and just generate one after another. If you have this inspiration, then don't worry, I can move it for you.
Yeah, there seems to be kind of three key themes that I'm seeing pop up, which are kind of using impact to kind of measure outcomes and understand the success of things and how we're doing and how we're progressing. And then there's the evidencing that it works. And then there's also the kind of the more dictionary definition of impact, which is that making a difference side of things. So as you can see, there's quite a spread already of the ideas of what impact might be. So I just want to pick out a few, if you don't mind. I'd like to pick on the additional things that come out from outcomes made, and just who was it that wrote that, and do they want to share a few more thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I wrote that. So I work at Salford CVS, and we give grants to groups, and sometimes they might tell us about an outcome. So they got 15 elderly people to come to a luncheon club, but then additional things that come from that is actually they've made new friends, they ended up going on holiday with them, or it's sort of like when you start chatting to them, you sort of hear about all the things that have come from the impact. And that was, I didn't know how to put it in words really.
Yeah, there's a few things that I'm actually writing an article for the Catalyst blog that will explain the differences around like outcomes and how you can kind of try to measure when they are kind of odd things that you can't really measure. So when you look at the outcomes and then you say, okay, so the final outcome was we had 50 people come to our lunch club a week. But then there are some things that you could suggest from that, such as like that meant that there were less calls to the loneliness line, or there were less calls out for social services, for care support, because loneliness is less of an issue. But also you've got, by people coming in, they might get, if they've got any medical issues, they might be seen earlier, so therefore you're stopping maybe a visit to A&E, and all of those kind of things as well. So that kind of understanding that it's not just that one measurement and that one impact metric actually has maybe 3 to 10 different things that you could position it towards as well. And you can use that same kind of outcome metric to try and understand a range of different things in your organisation. I want to ask about this post-it note as well, the change we make for beneficiaries, hopefully positive. Who was that, and can they share a bit more about what came from that?
It was me. So that's for me about the impact we make for individuals. So where we're supporting people individually, that or whatever your beneficiary looks like, that is important to know what that journey is and where their start and where their end is, and hopefully it's positive. Sometimes it's difficult to be able to BRIC, we support families, we support children and their families across Lincolnshire, and when we go into families, often they may score the way that we do things. They may score a certain, something for their social isolation or family management, and yet 3 weeks later they suddenly take a massive dip, and then you refer them on to another agency, but it looks like things have got worse. But actually, because they've built trust with you, they've told you that they're about to have their house repossessed, or that there's domestic abuse in the home, and actually the situation looks worse, but actually they have the right intervention then. We might not be there anymore, but we feel like we sometimes left them in a worse place. However, because once a lot of stuff comes out of the woodwork, there's an awful lot of complexity and chaos happens within a home, and it feels like things are at a heightened risk and a lot more agencies are involved. However, they're on a track, they're on a journey then to accessing the support they need. However, we probably aren't going to be the people that are involved in that to start with, because our support is not around that intensive higher risk support. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think that can kind of be transitioned across to a lot of other organisations where, you know, we quite often we make the mistake of only reporting on the positive impact. But there are some, so if for example, you take the communications impact that you've been making and you notice that you're measuring and tracking that and you notice a dip, that can cause you to panic, but it can also cause you to learn and change. But also it can prove that you're valuable in different ways. So do you track these families back through? Like, do you see them return and see them in a better place?
Yeah, so if we were to say a situation where there was domestic abuse that we picked up on, or that, you know, I mean, often it's that families will talk to us about things that they won't talk to statutory agencies about.
Yeah.
And if there's a perpetrator in the home, we wouldn't have a mentor, volunteer mentor, or member of staff in that home because there's too much of a risk for them. So we would always pull out of that support, but we might maintain contact, or we would work with the other agencies to know that when they're in a position to maybe moving on to their own home or needing support later, that they would come back to us.
Yeah. And then you can track the positive change, because you can see the dip and then see it coming back up.
Yeah.
I just want to pick on one more before we move on to another Jamboard. Reviewing our work and knowing where we need to improve. Who was it that wrote that, and can we have a moment to chat about it?
Yeah, that could have been me as well.
Was that you as well? I always feel like there's a lucky dip with these.
Yeah, well, I think other people have written the same as well. So
yeah,
and again, it's the it's understanding where things aren't going right, and I suppose that, you know, it's and being able to see where those trends are, and so that we can use that. And as you say, it's the knowing how we gather that information as a positive to be able to turn it into, you know, to improve in the future.
Yeah, which leads us on to our next slide. So I don't really like Simon Sinek because he's a bit of a guru, and I don't really like gurus, but I do like this quote where it talks about genius being the idea and impact coming from the action. And the reason that I wanted to highlight this, it kind of leads on from your point, Tracy, is that how we measure and track that action can help us to reach the impact that we desire. And so part of why we would measure and track impact is about answering questions that our organisation or ourselves need to find answers to. So that leads us on to the next Jamboard. Quite nicely. I'm going to copy that. So, what questions are you and your organisation looking to answer? If you can, it would be great to have at least one question that you in your role would like to answer, and one question that your role could maybe help your organisation answer, or just broadly. But yeah, it would be great if we can get a mix of both you and your organisation as well. feel like people are writing a little bit more this time, so I'm going to give you a little bit longer to get those typed up.
While you're writing, Bobby and I are having a fencing match and where to post it.
So I mean, there's a few kind of key themes that I'm noticing. There's the kind of, how can we make sure that we're making the impact that we want? There's the kind of idea of, are we effective enough as a team? So kind of the awkward KPI and the key performance indicator, and the OKR, which is your objectives, key results, which are two quite corporate measurements for team effectiveness, but can be made quite nicely if you don't focus on money. And then you've also got the kind of the long-term tracking. How can we use it to kind of test the work that we're doing? So I'm going to hopefully pick on someone new when I pick this one. So I want to, this one here. So how do I measure how well we are using resource, and can this be used to support the next action plan? Who was it that wrote that?
That would be me.
I found someone new. Yay!
Yeah, indeed. Where I'm coming from on this one is that everything we tend to do is encapsulated mini projects, and they're all there to get us into the direction of travel that we're trying to achieve, which is our vision. But it's all a stepping stone on that journey. So it's how we capture what we've achieved through that stepping stone to be able to say, can we have the resources and support for the next one? And a lot of that can actually be the financial input that frees the resources to allow us to move to that next step.
Yeah, so that's quite a one for kind of evidencing step by step, but it's also about kind of referring regularly back to that initial kind of strategy and your vision, and trying to set some measurements around that, which Lucy will be talking about next week in a lot more detail. So she will be, just so you know, she will be using these Jamboards to devise what she talks about. So she will try and pick up on the same themes to make sure that it's helpful for everyone. But the way that I've done it in the past is I've set, so for example, when I was trying to build a team of digital people, I would set some measurements and some work. We wanted to have a team of 5. So what did we need to achieve as a team of 1 to 2 people to get that 5? What evidence did we need to show that we were making a difference and proving value? And one key place where I went to was the fundraising team and the director of the fundraising team, to see what they needed to bring in more income. And they needed someone to be able to do kind of your Facebook ads and your Facebook marketing and your digital fundraising side of things. So we brought someone in there, set some metrics and measurements up against that. And then I went to the campaigns people. What did they need? And it was all about trying to solve their problems in order to get to my bigger picture. So quite often it is about trying to understand what what problems other people are trying to solve, and then also how that then fits into your strategic vision overall. It's all a big why, and there's a lot of tests. There's no one clean answer, unfortunately. So I would like to ask about how can I provide value for money? Who wrote that? Let's chat about.
I think that was me. How can I provide value for money? Yeah, because I guess conscious that the kind of work that we do, we're a social mobility charity. We could spend a lot of money doing not very much quite easily. So there's always that question of how can we use every pound wisely to maximize the impact that we have, because we're always going to have a finite pot of money. At the end of the day, the size of the pot might change, but it will always be finite. So the impact that we can have will be driven ultimately by how we can maximize the impact of every pound that we spend. So there's always that question for me about, is that the most efficient way that we can do this particular thing? Are we using our staff? Are we using our volunteers? Are we using platforms, that provide that best value for money? So for me, looking at the impact always has to look back at, well, what does it cost you to get that impact, and can you do it cheaper? Because if you can do it cheaper, then you can get more impact for the same amount of money.
Yeah, and I think it also goes back to kind of doing those little tests. So because I guess some of your work will be kind of more long term, and they'll need some long term tracking. You can't track social mobility in the 6-month project.
Nope.
But you may be able to do some small experiments in 6 months that could then lead to that longer term vision, and it's about kind of giving each project that long enough time to show that it's doing something, and within that maybe reviewing, could it be done cheaper? But equally, you've got to try and think, you've got to then balance that with, if I do it cheaper, what's the impact on that as well?
Yeah,
so it's
value for money for me. I think you're hitting a really important point. Like, there's a point at which you start cutting corners and then reduce your impact. You can bring the cost right down, but you can actually minimize your impact. It's about hitting the sweet spot.
Yeah, and that you'll be able to do by running lots and lots and lots and lots of tests, and it won't be the same. I'm sorry, it's not it's not a straight answer. But yeah, it will be about, for me, it would be about kind of an iterative process and lots of tests, and just making sure that but with each test you'll learn something. So it may be that the next time you're trying to answer a similar question, you already kind of know that you don't need to do 3 of those 4 tests. You might want to run the thing that worked last time and maybe a variation, so that you can prove that kind of way of working works. And that's the kind of the big thing with impact measurement, is it can really help with that kind of data-driven decision making that's part of the iterative process. And I'm just going to pick on one more. Trying to read them to see if it's going to be someone that I've already picked on. I'm going to go with are the team effective one. Tracy.
Yeah, so that is about KPIs and people's work plans, and people, whether or not they're being able sometimes to see trends in people within teams or different areas, and just knowing whether, and it comes again back to the cost effective as well, and whether there's a way of managing and being able to see how how our operational teams are actually performing with families. And we've had an instance of one member of staff who persistently, we had issues with not issues, but there was a lack of engagement, and families never went anywhere, and they were never linked with volunteers, and there was always lots of excuses. But everyone's got, there's always those within any statistics or KPIs. There's always a room for the things that don't go to plan, but there's usually some way of being able to, across a whole team, of being able to see what that average is. But when you've got one member of staff that persistently never has that that engagement and things, then the families are never achieving. It looks like the families are never achieving or never moving on, and it actually comes back to the member of staff that simply isn't doing their role.
Yeah, and that kind of comes to definitions, I suppose, and what the definition of good in that instance is, and what would be a good result in terms of contacting your organisation and then being passed on to a volunteer. What's that timeline? What's good, and where are the outliers? And then you can start to, through conversations with the team. I would never just put this on people. Like, have a conversation with the operations team and talk about what they think is good, and get them to set that kind of good range and the outliers. And then they'll be a part of developing their own kind of measurement and tracking and impact. And it's all about making sure that they're working together and collectively as a team to improve the outcomes for these families. And if you do it in that way, then it's more human, rather than quite often when you put on a kind of effectiveness tracking, it can be pushed back on quite heavily. But it could be a way of kind of, you'll probably find some really interesting things by doing that research as well. What one person may see as a good outcome is completely different to the rest of the team. So it'll bring people on board as well that way. Did anyone else write a post-it note that they'd like to talk about? Before I move on. No? Okay. So this, I don't normally go to physicists, but I do quite like this quote. So Enrico Fermini has said that there are two possible outcomes when you're measuring. If the result confirms a hypothesis, then you've evidenced. If the result is contrary to the hypothesis, then you've made a discovery. And this is the really important thing about impact measurement and tracking. It can help you prove to your funders or the board that you're doing the work that you say you're doing, and that the impact you as an organisation on society is happening. The other thing it can do is it can say, actually, maybe we need to completely rethink how we're doing things and start testing some other assumptions. And that's where kind of the work that you have done in the past, I hope, maybe, in terms of kind of iterative ways of working, and looking at the data to see where new decisions can be made and new tests can be made. That's where the real power for me, as a kind of digital strategist of impact measurement comes in. Lucy, I believe, will sit more on the kind of evidencing side of things. But whichever side of this quote you sit on, you can see that there's an importance and a value to measuring and tracking your impact. And then on to Jamboard number 3. If it is the right one. No, that's the wrong one, sorry. This is the one that I edited and added urgently as we were waiting for everyone. So here is the link now. Sorry for that, everyone. This is about your organisation and what areas of the organisation could benefit from impact measurement or tracking. So kind of what role types, what what kind of beyond the questions that your organisation are trying to solve, like what else could be helpful there? Please feel free to still add some, but I'm just aware of the time, so I want to start by asking for the person who wrote every team and or role can benefit. Who was that?
That was me. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yes, I can hear you. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, I just wrote this down because it's definitely a focus for us at Turn to Us and thinking about ways that you can embed a learning culture throughout the whole organisation, because it's not just the responsibility of one team to kind of understand the progress that you're making within your work. It's definitely kind of like a mindset as well to think about how you as an individual and the work that you're doing, how you can understand how that contributes to a longer term outcome of the whole organization's work, if that makes sense. So totally, it's kind of like not specific to, well, it can be as well, but the way I'm thinking about it is like impact measurement is everyone's responsibility, and everyone has a duty to kind of understand the way that their work contributes to those longer term outcomes.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you can't set a metric on, so if we take kind of fundraising and the processes behind that, in most organizations, if you've not got any digitized processes, you will have someone in the kind of admin type role that receives maybe a check, and then they have to pass that and process that across to the fundraising team, who then write a letter of thanks. If there is someone and something going wrong in that small process, then the person that's donated £20 to your organisation might not get a letter within the week or 2 weeks that they think is a good thank you time, and then they might not donate to your organisation again. So the measurement on and tracking of people's activities and impact to the organisation is huge. I mean, I got really into measuring when I was really new to like my first proper job. I was a digital officer at a mental health charity, and first off I was like, I'm going to do a Excel spreadsheet just to keep a track of everything, just to prove that I'm valuable, because I was the first person in the organisation to have this role. So I knew that I needed to kind of evidence my impact. But then when I saw numbers kind of changing and dropping off, I knew that there was something that I needed to do and test to see how I might be affecting that change. Could it be that I was becoming quite boring and repeating myself and just churning out the same content, and it wasn't engaging enough anymore? What might I need to change? And that kind of really empowered me by seeing my own metrics and my own measurement and wanting to learn. It gave me that empowerment to develop a growth mindset, which is that kind of learning, continuous learning that you were talking about. And I think that's kind of really important if you want to kind of continue to grow. I'm just going to pick on another one. Better and more collaboration. Who popped that one in? Keep picking on you, Tracy. Sorry, you're obviously putting ones that really stand out to me.
Does someone else want to answer it?
I mean, there is communication between teams is fairly similar.
Yeah, I think it's for us one of the in the voluntary sector, one of the biggest things that we know is really important is collaboration with other partners, and it's how we demonstrate our worth to be part of those collaborations and also build collaborations, because it's, I think, the going forward and the challenges that we all face, that partnership working is what's going to not only provide us the beneficiaries with the service, but actually keep organisations going, and move away from what we see a lot where people, instead of working out how they secure funding or develop their own services to deliver or to meet their own objectives, they start doing other things and stepping on other people's toes and moving into other areas of work to keep somebody in a job or make sure they can pay the rent next month, or rather than really consider whether what they do is linked to objectives, which I think is where impact comes from as well. Is that impact is making sure that the impact we're measuring is, we can always take it back to what our objectives are as an organisation.
Definitely, and you can use both impact measurement and objectives to kind of, like you said, help you keep on track. If quite often in the charity that I'm a trustee of, we're discussing, do we need to completely transition away from the work that we've been doing for the last 5 years, because right now we can't physically do it. We're a charity that work in prisons, and we can't get into prisons right now, obviously because of COVID. And we've had so many conversations in this last 18 months about what that transition might look like, and every single time we've pushed back to our charity objectives, which are not about rehabilitation. So when we're having conversations about reducing crime in the community, actually we're going to be stepping on other people's toes. Yes, we can get funding for that right now, but that's not what we do as an organisation. And it's always really important to kind of, and we would have got lost in that. We don't have the right expertise in that. We have a lot of expertise in offender rehabilitation from prison through the gate. And there are other organisations that have a lot more expertise in the prevention side of things. So yeah, it's really important to kind of keep measuring that as well.
It's quite brave though as well for organisations to do that, rather than
it's terrifying, don't get me wrong.
Well, it is about examining your feasibility and deciding whether or not there is place for you in in what you're doing, which is it's a very difficult thing for organisations to do. And I mean, we rebranded a couple of years ago and moved away from our national network, and we started out on a path of our strategy. We sort of kept it fairly loose, so we could we could make sure that we were able to sort of take any opportunity that presented to us. But then after a little while, we just said, no, actually, our expertise is children and families. So we need to make sure that that's what our message is, so people really understand what we do, and therefore it makes it easier again to measure that impact against what we do.
Definitely. So this is a horrific block of content, so sorry for anyone with any kind of accessibility issues, but what I wanted to highlight with this is that impact measurement, like we've just kind of discussed, is there for everyone. It supports strategic decision making, it supports digital transformation, it supports funder reporting, evidencing your value, decision making, service design, service delivery, productivity, iterative ways of working, finding the true value of what we do. But yet we still, as a sector, find impact measurement either worrying or something that we leave to the last minute to create a report. So the kind of next question that I have is, what do you do now? What do you measure now? And how do you then act on those results? And this is one Jamboard which has 2 different pages. So we'll look at the first question and then look at the how do you act on those results after. So the first question is, what do you measure now? You can put more than one post-it note, don't worry. So before we start talking about what you measure now, if you've already added what you measure, please click onto the right arrow at the top of your screen that says next frame, and move on to how do you act on your results, and then we will talk about them as a whole. Right. I'm going to first pick on this group here, which is, I'd say the kind of like the metric based measurements. So, you know, the number of roles created, how many people are attending events, who's joining a membership, how many groups we've supported, participant numbers. Can someone who put a post-it note in that group share what they do as their organisation?
Yeah, two of those are me, so I'm quite happy to.
Perfect.
Yeah, event attendance and new members, kind of who's joining, how many joining, is kind of our main impact. I'm kind of part of the families team, so we've got kind of a wider team that cover the whole organisation, but specifically, yeah, we're looking at kind of attracting new members, where they're coming from, how do they kind of find out about us, why are they joining, which is quite important for us as well. And then once they have joined, what are they doing? Are they coming to events? Are they doing things where they just sort of hanging out in the background and getting our mailings? And then kind of looking and drilling down into why that is, and why they, if they don't come, what are the barriers that are preventing them from attending? And
what do you do with those measurements? Like, how do you act on them? Like you said that you would ask why. How would you kind of?
Yeah, it's sort of yeah. A lot of our kind of a lot of our families, we look after families with disabled children, so a lot of them have kind of a myriad of numbers of reasons as why they don't come to things. So it's kind of looking at ways of making families more comfortable, encouraging the attendance, because there'll be other families who are similar there, rather than kind of having them on their own. We're starting to think about setting up a buddy system, so any new members that join have got somebody kind of further along in their journey that they can talk to first, to sort of break down that barrier a little bit, and yeah, just try and make sure that it's as accessible as possible for whatever reason.
And so you're kind of creating little experiments based on whether you see event attendees and all of that kind of stuff. Great. And then the next thing that I want to kind of pick out, there's a lot of progress kind of type 1. So if we look at the kind of learner achievements, evaluate delivery projects, and the participants' progress, evaluation forms to show before and after. Anyone in that group want to kind of share where that comes from?
I'm happy enough to say a bit on what I put in there, which is our kind of what we call our capabilities framework, which is basically we're trying to measure the hard and soft skills that our participants gain from the sessions that we deliver, because ultimately we want to be able to demonstrate a sort of I suppose a form of kind of causality in terms of what we do, to be able to say, like, this is genuinely teaching them something, and we can demonstrate these sessions are doing that. We're at a very early stage there, but that's a kind of a self-evaluation where we ask them at the start and at the end of the program to self-evaluate their skills on the basis of a number of different elements of this framework, with the idea being that we'll be able to say, over the course of the program, this is how they've developed, and that demonstrates that actually by running the sessions we are actually having an impact. That's the theory, but we're very conscious that what we're trying to grasp a hold of is something quite nebulous. It's not something that you can see in the same way as some of the other things, like what we've just spoken about there, you know, the kind of the number of hours delivered, or the number of people that you see, or you know, that kind of thing. It's something that just can't be seen and measured directly in the same way, so it's quite difficult, if I'm being honest. But
I mean, I'm trying to do something fairly similar with the sector and confidence in digital skills, so I'd love to have a more deep discussion about this another time. But one thing that I've noticed in the work that I've been doing to kind of create my version of it for the sector is that and it's probably quite similar with the work that you do, actually, it's kind of there's a confidence which then leads to change. So if you have, say, a young person who is struggling at school and they may have an outlook that doesn't look as good, if they go onto your course and they demonstrate that they feel more confident, does that mean that they then go on and progress to college? And those are the kind of things that you've got. So not only are you proving that they've got a shift in confidence, but then you can later track them and bring in another measurement to see what that led to. And that's kind of quite an important thing, I think. It's like you don't ever just take one measurement, always take a few and then work out what that could mean. So with all the questions that you're trying to answer, there's probably 4 or 5 different measurements that will help evidence whether that's right or wrong. And then I just want to have a quick chat about, so I think we've chatted quite a lot about the kind of the evidencing for funders, but I wanted to just kind of have a quick look at the communications metrics. So there's the comms engagement metrics, number of people using our tools, helpline, impact and grant making. And then there's the discrete counts of engagement, which are like the contact logs and the memberships. Is there someone that wrote one of those post-it notes that can speak to it?
Yep, I can. So a lot of our tools of Turn to Us tools are on our website, and the tools include a grant search tool where you can look at your eligibility criteria and see what grants are available for you out there. And then another tool is the benefits calculator, where you put in your information about your circumstance, and then you can it tells you what benefits you're entitled to. So within that, we look at how many people access those tools via the website, how long they spend putting their data in, at what stage do people drop out, how many people are completing a benefits calculation and then go on to actually apply for those benefits. Just like engagement levels on website and particular pages, just lots of things really.
And then how do you use those, like how do you act on those measurements? Would you would you use the number of people applying for benefits to then create a new service based on that if you saw an increase?
I think, well, I can't really give the complete answer because I don't actually work on that team, but at the moment we have taken all the data and everything that's collected from those metrics, and we've actually updated the benefits calculator based on what we've learnt. So awesome. It's far more accessible. It's there's different languages and translations. I don't really know the complete ins and outs of what those changes, the exact metrics those were based on, but yeah, we do make quite a lot of updates and changes to our services.
The reason I asked that question is in the middle of for about 10 months in lockdown, I spent quite a long time at a large union, and we had to close our call centre, and then we tested a kind of in-hours chat type thing, and then from that we were able to create quite a lot of support content and documents based on the information that we were taking from that. So we got a lot more as an organisation from the chat than we did from the phone calls, because they were getting logged but not shared. So it's quite interesting to kind of use something that you've already got and then discreetly use that to create an impact and influence new services. So it's interesting that you're kind of using the measurements of your tools to make improvements to what you've done. Is there anyone that wants to chat about a post-it note that they put up just before I move on to the how? No. So on this, how do you act on the results? There was quite a lot, which was awesome, about kind of iterative redesign and revisiting strategy based on those results. So is there someone that wants to kind of talk to that? Anyone?
I was deliberately staying quiet there in case someone else wanted to say something. Yeah, I put the iterative session redesign. I think that's just basically the principle that we evaluate every single session that we deliver, and anything that we can learn, we will implement in the next session that we deliver. So we're delivering very similar sessions on a regular periodic basis, so we can sort of gradually redesign as we go and evolve, rather than sort of saying this is the course that we've set and we will not look at that again for the rest of the year. Like, we can build in a sort of, oh right, okay, that didn't quite work, how can we fix it? And I think from my perspective, actually, I've called it iterative session redesign, but I don't know if I'm actually making it sound grander than it is, because it is as basic as sort of saying, all right, well, the way that we ordered the transport that time didn't really work, so let's fix that. But to me, that almost is iterative redesign, because it's like, if a little bit of the process doesn't work, tweak it.
Yeah, I mean, it totally is. I mean, I was having a very similar discussion yesterday about kind of the process that I've been developing be more digital. You know, eventually I see it as potentially some membership group or whatever that might be. But before that, I need to develop content. So how do I develop that content? I run sessions like this, and then I get feedback. And then if it's a positive session, so everything I'm running is a test. It's always a test. And I'm always then going to act on the feedback that I get, and, you know, the feeling I get in the room, what worked well, what didn't work well, what might I want to change, and then build on that. And that is exactly iterative approach. And what I find is it's reducing the effort that I'm making. So rather than creating a kind of and designing a full curriculum, I'm testing little bits, and then I know that every little aspect of it will work. And when it doesn't, I can slightly tweak those things. And it means that I'm not putting in quite as much effort and resources as I potentially would have been had I done it a more traditional route and just kind of delivered it there and then. So I want to have a quick chat about the, I really want to speak to the person that put the regular reports to trustees and the associated grilling, but I have a feeling that was probably Colin because it's the same colour.
Yeah, sorry, that was me again.
Did anyone else want to talk about the associated grilling to giving reports to trustees? If not, I will call back on Colin. Colin, looks like you're up. Sorry.
Yeah, so we're a small charity, and you know, I'm the general manager, so I'm the one that ultimately is held to account for the day-to-day operation by the trustees. And you know, it must be said, actually, I find that process very useful. It's a very constructive process if everyone goes into it with an open mind. But you know, ultimately, you know, there's a lot of things. You know, you mentioned things like KPIs earlier. You know, I report that into the board, and then the board asks me questions about why the numbers are what they are. You know, but I actually see acting on the results as being that conversation, because sometimes they spot things that I haven't seen. They're like, right, well, what's going on there? What are you going to do about that? And that can actually then impact what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, because they're sort of that sort of just ever so slightly one step removed from the day-to-day. So it is a grilling. You know, I do get put through my paces, but I think that actually that governance aspect is part of how we act on the results. Because that reporting mechanism is a way that keeps me honest, I suppose.
Yeah. And there was one other that really popped out to me, and I just want to, where I can't find it. The funding applications, this one here. So how do you, so we use the results in applications for funding, and we use the results to adjust the programme, inform the development of the programme content. Do you want to speak a bit about that, whoever it was?
That was me. I think you have kind of covered it, you know, talking about participants, the impact that the programme's had on participants' lives, and using the comments and their statements to help us prove that the programme is useful and positive. And also for the I just put that last part, some negative comments or the less than impactful parts of the programme. We use what people have said and their ideas and suggestions to tweak the delivery, and yeah, the way that the programme kind of develops organically, and that's kind of how we use the results of feedback from our theatre makers.
Yeah. And so when you're looking at kind of maybe a negative feedback, what do? Do you kind of just say that much? Do you make assumptions based on that, or do you kind of, how would you act on that?
So I think we don't, at the moment, we don't really do, I'd say, enough going back and interviewing the second time. I think, yeah, we do make assumptions based on the less than positive comments when there are some. So yeah, I think that being on the Catalyst programme has helped us to identify that and think, well, okay, we are doing a lot of guessing about what we think they need, and now we start to be a bit more data driven with those, and more focused on those negative comments when they do come in, which isn't often or anything, but it's just the fact that when we do get one, that we should expound on it much more than we do, instead of, you know, the majority of positive comments going straight to reports.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I wanted to kind of pick it out, because you know, there are those two different very valuable uses of measuring and tracking your impact, and that is one, so you as an organisation can learn, but also so you can grow financially, and also build in more service users, because, you know, if you're trying to prove your value, you have kind of two audiences to do that to. Yeah. You know, those that you're helping and those that will pay to help you help as well. So I think, yeah, I wanted to kind of, it's quite an important one that highlighted that, so thanks for sharing. So the kind of penultimate thing that I want to kind of ask you is, we all know that everyone is incredibly busy. So how, I just want to take kind of some time, maybe in the chat or just speak out, raise your hand. How do you think you could give maybe more time, or have you recently given more time to measuring and tracking impact? And if you've found it useful, can you share that with everyone else? Because I'm sure they'll find it useful too. Tracy.
I think I haven't found a way of doing it. However, we're on a path to trying to, because I think the thing that we know is that because we're not doing it effectively, it actually takes up more time, because we're scrambling about for information, because we gather a lot of information, but actually it's not coordinated. It's not, we've started it through our volunteering platform that we've done through the CAST programme, but it's, yeah, and we're now expanding that to our families. So and that, I think that's, for us, is about putting the investment in to start with, to ensure that the information is automatic and it's there, and we really understand what it is we need. You know, it's about those what questions are we trying to answer? So it's really beginning to think about that and doing it in a coordinated and a simple way, because I think sometimes we can try and gather, I think we're trying to gather too much information, so it's not actually meaningful in the end.
Yeah, and that process can be an iterative one, and you know, you can start off by gathering 1 to 2 bits of information and then explore what they might mean, and if that doesn't give you enough, add something else. I mean, one way that I've done it in the past is I've created little kind of 10-minute slots in my diary to collect information that I know is going to be useful. So going back to kind of my first role as that digital comms officer, I would every Friday go into Facebook and download that week's report. And then on Monday morning, I'd have it ready so I could copy and paste and put that in. And it's just those little things that I would kind of diarise that would mean, you know, I knew that Fridays were slower, so I could just put something in my diary to gather. And then on Monday, when I had a clearer head and I wasn't looking forward to the weekend, I was able to kind of sort that out into something. But it meant that there was I wasn't spending all day gathering and then processing that information. So that's one way that you could look at. Is there anyone else that's kind of testing a way of doing this, or is really struggling, actually? Anyone really struggling to kind of find the time to consistently measure impact? Nigel, I can see your head nodding.
Yeah, trying to maintain KPIs, it's not quite within our culture. We tend to be more agile, and I tend to lead with certain aims of directions rather than discrete deliverables. So for us, it's a case of listening to our community, observing what's being said, seeing if there's any trends or particular hot topics that come in. And then it's almost a case of going and looking for the evidence to either support or disprove what we're seeing within the community, and then using that to define which way we go.
So
it's
perhaps
it's
KPIs aren't.
Yeah, we're very much retrospective.
Yeah. So there is that kind of, there's a retrospective that helps guide you, but then there's also that proactive, where do we need to go in the future? So do you use the kind of research that you're doing to develop something in your reactive way to then form something in a more proactive way?
It's a reflective way rather than reactive. So we are constantly listening and observing what's going on, and then we'll take the time out to just reflect on what we picked up collectively, and then devise things that we want to test. But I always talk about a 0.8 prototype. So we'll get something out there. We're not expecting it to work, but we're going to learn from it and refine from it.
Yeah.
But taking that approach there's no driven framework of saying this is what we're going to do for the next 3 months, unless it's actually specifically funded as a project. It's more a case of being intuitive and saying this is right for our community at this time. We can respond to it.
I would say in that case, it's probably one thing that I would do if I was you is have a look at OKRs and your operation key results. So then you can set those 6 months kind of, what do we need to do? And what would those key results look like? Because your KPIs are slightly more, they're less fluid, I would say. And an OKR, although traditionally it is about kind of, we need to, in the next 3 months, we want to bring in £40,000. You don't need to set your OKR to be a financial one. You could set your OKR to be a more socially minded one. It could be, we want to see a number of people, or we want to help this number of people, or we want to see these people with positive impacts, or we want to grow our volunteering team, and those kind of things. But every time you like consistently review them, and then you can say, okay, actually I've set this one's far too high. I'm never going to reach that 40,000 in this 3 months, or I'm never going to reach these 50 new volunteers in these 3 months. Because within that 3 months, you can say, if I'm going to reach 50, I need to have 25 people in the first month. And then, if you haven't reached that, you're not going to reach this, and you can adjust it. But they need to be quite ambitious. So you can you've got a way to go with that. So Lucy asked me to put these 2 things in this session for you, just to kind of give you a few things to ponder on in the next week. So how do we measure impact? How is about the approach to exploring these impact questions and then creating our impact plan? So a lot of the start of this was about kind of, what does impact mean to us? What questions are we trying to solve? And then the what is about what we actually do and what tools we can use to explore these questions, and then how we show our findings. So we always need to start with the why, which is the questions, and then we can look at exploring the how and then the what, which Lucy will take you through next week. So as we close off, I'm going to open, anyone can kind of answer any questions, but I've got a quick little feedback form that I'm going to share that I would really appreciate your responses to. And Debbie's just about to share the link for next week.
Yeah, so you can sign up now. If you click on that link, you can sign up now, and it's going to be the 1st of September, same time. So Thursday next week. Is that all right? Thursday, yeah.
Yes, yeah, it's the 1st. Thanks everyone for joining today. I had a good time. I hope you did too.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of the day. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, everyone.